Hey Kale, this is Jess. I wanted to make this follow-up video for you. I told you I kind of wanted to talk to you over the phone, touch base with you where I'm at with the car right now, with what's going on. So I just wanted you to see everything. So basically, after you'd come out, you got my lines put back together, and you got fuel pumping to the fuel. That's what Firestone said. They said, well, we put a pump in and it wasn't bringing fuel up. But you and I know it was an electrical issue, and that's why the pump wasn't moving fuel, and you fixed that, reconnected the lines, and you told me what I needed to do to get the car started, and that was replace the pressure regulator in there, and then check on those fuel lines at the fuel filter. So once I got the regulator and the car started up again, I did replace the fuel injector. I got a remanufactured one from Rock Auto. I figured if that thing was clogged, the regulator was bad, which they don't often go bad. The injector probably wasn't in good shape either, and it wasn't. So went ahead and replaced that. However, I drive the car down the street a loop around, and it wouldn't even make it 2 laps around the street before it died. So I was trying to figure out what that was. Was it the map sensor? Was it vacuum lines? Or just going back and forth with people online. But what I failed to mention to the car club people is, and when my mechanic, like I said, mobile mechanic did the timing belt, and he told me my fuel pump was bad or there was a fuel issue. I pointed this out to him. I said, look, the distributor's loose, and this is what it was. The distributor on this side, the hole was not bored out properly, so this hole was smaller than the one on the right side. So it was causing the cap to become loose. And a bunch of people said, yeah, that's definitely your problem. So once I got that in, car was on the road again. I was driving it. I changed up the oil. It was driving. Now, there were a couple of things of concern. One of the minor things was my windshield wiper motor. Something was going on with that. I couldn't get it to work. I put a new motor in. I rewired everything. I put the linkage all together. It worked for a while, then it shut off again. So I don't know what's going on up there. As you saw in my pictures before, I had a small transmission fluid leak. That's coming from down back here. So it's coming from back. It's not coming from the pan. I don't know if you'll see it in this picture. It's coming from somewhere up on the back side of the transmission. Also, the front mount here is bad. If you push on the engine hard enough, you can rock the engine back and forth. So that was the issue down there. I don't remember if I showed you this, but the key, I don't know if you even remember this, but the key is stuck in the ignition, and that happened when the tow truck driver got it off the truck at Firestone. I don't know why it's stuck in there. I can't get it out. And then on top of that, when I would turn the steering wheel, the horn would just go off for no reason. So I ended up removing the airbag and horn fuse because, it's just not safe. I don't want to honk at somebody and get in an accident. So had to remove that. Now the biggest issue, and I just couldn't seem to figure it out, was the intermittent starting issues. And this had gone on the entire time. So what would happen was I would drive the car somewhere, and occasionally when I went, I'd drive it, park it, then I'd go back into the car to try and start it up. It wouldn't want to start. You'd have to crank it a few times for it to start. And I have no idea what it is. Could it be something to do with the cylinder? Could it be that electrical issue still needs to be worked out at the pump? I don't know. So, a few things that I noticed, and I was trying to check off the list, were, the first thing that you had brought up, and that was the lines at the fuel filters. So I'm going to show you what was done there, what I did there. So when you came out, you told me, you said you need to get those lines looked at, they were weak. Fuel filter was hanging like, here's how it's supposed to be up here properly, but the fuel filter was hanging like right here, and both lines were bad. So it was hanging, and as I was driving the car, I must have hit something, the fuel filter got dinged, and I broke down on the side of the road, and that cost me like $200. So I went in, I redid the lines and everything, and then unbeknownst to me, I didn't know that you had to get fuel-injected lines and not fuel lines, so what ended up happening was you'd start to see stuff seeping out. So I got those fixed. I ended up cutting that quick connect fitting because I couldn't get it off. So that was fixed. No more seepage or anything. New fuel-injected lines, as you can see. So then the next thing that could have been, and I was driving it for a while, and eventually, as of like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, started to hear a loud whining noise coming from the fuel pump. So I'll go under here and I'll show you. Obviously it was the fuel pump, but why was the new fuel pump going out so quickly? So you look at the pump there. Now Firestone, like I said, Firestone had took the old pump out that was like 10 years old. They put a Delphi one in, and they said, I'm assuming they left it in there because they said it was bad. But in reality, as you know, you and I know, that it was an electrical issue at the pump. But why would a new fuel pump go bad so quickly? I had suspected that there was sludge or some kind of contaminants in the gas tank. Car had been sitting like almost 5 years, and then it had sat another 2 years while back, just on and off. So I figured, the gas tank needed to be cleaned. So dropped the tank myself. I ended up getting a jack. I didn't have a car at that time, so I couldn't get a jack. So I ended up, once this thing was running again, I was able to get a decent jack to get up underneath this thing. Pulled out the pump, pulled out the sender, put all that in. Filler net gasket was leaking. That was something that we didn't notice, because the only way you're going to see the fuel coming out of that is if the car's running, but Firestone had cracked that too. So dropped the tank, dropped the pump, and what was causing this was they had left the strainer for the old fuel pump inside the gas tank. So I'm assuming that strainer caught onto the new fuel pump, and it was causing the pump to work super hard. But it had broke off all over in the gas tank, like in little bits and pieces, and I ended up throwing some alcohol in, vacuuming it. Then I threw some isopro alcohol in there. Surprisingly, the tank was very clean. I showed somebody a picture of it, and they said they were surprised, being that the car had sat for so long. But I'm assuming that little strainer that was left in there was what was causing the fuel pump to work as hard as it did. So I put all of that in. So I'll go back to the front of the car. So I put the new fuel pump in. It was pumping fuel to the system. However, the car still wouldn't start. Crank, no start. So I was at a dead end. And some people were telling me maybe it's your injector, maybe it's your regulator. I was just trying to figure out where I was going to go from this point. So I ended up making another video. And one of the things I didn't really cover a whole lot was the issue, and we talked about it, the issue with the number 2 spark plug hole. So I took the spark plugs out, right as the fuel pump died, and I noticed that they were black, primarily spark plug hole number 2. So, and it was hard to tell if it was oil or carbon. It didn't look like slimy, it just looked like black. Hard to tell. I mean, the plugs only had like I didn't even get 1,800 miles out of them. So they were black. Ended up replacing them, And as I was doing that, I just decided to vacuum out each one of the spark plug holes. And after I did that, and I put the new spark plugs in, lo and behold, the car started up again. So I made a follow-up video, and somebody said, you probably have some carbon buildup in the engine. You can either use Seafoam or Lucas tune-up in a bottle and put a thing of that in a tank or two of gas. So I did that. Drove the car, and the intermittent starting issue happened again. I drove it, let it set for a little bit, went back into the car. It didn't want to crank initially. It took a couple times to get it to crank. I honestly believe it has something to do with cylinder number 2. There's always been like a slight tick ever since I got the car running, primarily from this side, 1 and 2 side of this cylinder, these 2 cylinders. But when I got it home, it was particularly loud, so I went to check, and the spark plug was kind of off, and it's always been kind of loose, so I'm pretty sure that had something to do with the rethread. So I got a little chaser, another kit, and I was going to rebore the hole again, because that's what somebody told me to do. So it's your only option, that or tear the cylinder head apart. So I got the chaser in there, and I thought I'd be able to just grind away that threading. However, the threading fell into the spark plug hole, and you physically can't get it out. It's impossible, because the threading is bigger than a spark plug hole, and it took pressure to put it in. It would take pressure to get it out. The only other way I can get it out is if I could somehow break it in there, and it's just not physically possible with pliers. So you have to either tear the cylinder head apart or replace the cylinder head. So problem is too, is even if I got it out, I tore it apart myself, this hole is bore out. I mean, it's not gonna, I think the engine was ticking because there was air coming out from it. And I think spark plug number 1's having that issue too. It's going to need to be rethreaded. But it's primarily coming from this hole. You can't get the threader out. The head's kind of worn itself. If you look at my coolant temp sensor, you can't get this thing out. I've tried to get it out. It was easy years ago when I put it in, but this thing's like frozen in there. If you open this thermostat housing up, it's all rusted out inside. So this head needs to be worked or replaced. Problem is, you can't get a replacement one on AutoZone. They run their price at $450 to $600, before core charge. However, you can't get them. They don't make them anymore. Rock Auto doesn't have them. O'Reilly's doesn't have them. So we're kind of at a roadblock here. I don't know what to do at this point. But that's what's been going on with the car. Just those little issues, and then just figuring this out. I mean, it drove fine, except for the few issues: the motor mount, the intermittent starting, key, and the just those little issues. I think the belts need to be redone. They're 10 years old. My front brake pads are low. If you look here, I'm low in the master cylinder, and you look at this one, and it's full. I think my front brake pads are low, but other than that, the car drove fine. Just those little things, a trans leak, just those little things needed to be done. But we've got an issue here. I just don't have the ability to take it apart on my own. I mean, but that's where we stand on this. I just want to make the update video just so you knew everything that was going on with the car. But that's really where I'm at right now with this, and hopefully I can figure it out. But just want to touch base.